what we want to do is we want to bring clarity to you as to the steps that you should take a prospect through during your sales process. I mean, if we want to improve our control over the sales process, then we need to know what stages we want to go through. It's just like that race car driver. They need to know what pit stops are scheduled and around what what lap number they need to happen, and what's going to happen in each pit stop. If a driver didn't have that clarity, how are they going to manage the vehicle in the race, right? They're just going to drive until they're almost out of gas and then pit stop. They don't. I'm not a race expert, but I know that they don't do that. This is our effort to give you more clarity in the area of the race that you want to basically run. Now, I have some very common sales process stages listed out here. I'm going to go through them one at a time. Yours may be slightly different. I'm going to show you some variations of this, and I'm fairly confident that regardless of what you sell, we're going to present a process here that should be close to one that you could go through for your product. And we only really highlight the first 3 steps because when you get beyond either these 3 steps or one of the 3 steps that you pick, it's common for the process to take a lot of different shapes, either for each prospect that you deal with, or from salesperson to salesperson, or even from product to product, meaning you could sell 5 different products and each of those products kind of have a different sales process. But let's go through these. These are very common and you should be able to relate to them. But the very first step in most sales processes is an initial contact. So that could be a cold call, it could be an email, it could be an inbound call. You went to my website and you called me. Now it's important to know that this initial contact, if you're talking to someone, you might end up talking to them for more than 2 to 5 minutes. But this stage of the sales process only is 2 to 5 minutes long. And what I want you to do, I want you to focus 80% of the attention on the prospect at this time and 20% on you. If you go to a networking event, you'll notice that the good networkers will focus asking questions about you. The very average common networkers will sit there and talk about themselves. And you can almost also think of that as when you go out and meet people, when you meet someone for lunch, whether it's a friend or someone you've just met, someone that's very conscious of building relationships is going to focus more of the attention on you. So this isn't necessarily your natural instinct. Your natural instinct is to talk more about you and what you're interested in. I want you to flip that. I want you to focus 80% on the prospect, 20% on you. Now what we're going to try to accomplish in this meeting is we're going to try to pre-qualify the prospect, and I'm going to dig into that. That's a very important goal, and I'm just going to come back to that after we go through these stages to explain what I want you to do there. But when you pre-qualify, you're going to gain some information, and I want you to build some interest in the prospect. Now, going back to those 2 goals of the ultimate goal, selling the product, and the immediate goal of moving to the next stage, that comes into play here when we talk about building interest. Now, if we're trying to build interest on the prospect side for what we sell, now we're dipping into the 20% on you, which logically it could make sense to do that at the end of this initial contact, right before you go for the close. So right before I close you on the next step, I'm going to try to build a little interest. Now, notice I said build a little interest because I don't need to build enough interest for my ultimate goal of selling the product. I need to build enough interest to get you to agree to move to the next stage, which is a lower bar. And notice when I said close you for the next step, so I mentioned always be closing earlier. I do agree with the ABC, the always be closing. You should always be closing your prospect, but it's not always be closing your prospect for the sale. It's always be closing your prospect for the next step in your sales process. If we move to the next stage is an appointment. And I label this an appointment. For many salespeople, the label of appointment works. Depending on the type of business you're in, it might be just a conversation. It might not necessarily be a formal appointment, but just consider this a step, and you could label it whatever makes sense for you. But this could be a phone call. It could be meeting someone face to face. This could be take the shape of a 20 to 30 minute meeting. Now we want to begin to shift the bar, and it can be a little bit more balanced where it's 50% of the attention on the prospect and 50% on you. It could possibly be in that order too, I think is ideal. Let's get back together, and I'm going to try to make it to where we're talking about you in the first half of the meeting, and then the second half of the meeting I can talk about me. Now, the goals for this meeting, we also are going to pre-qualify, and that's going to continue, and I'm going to explain why that continues when we get back to that. But we're also going to hard qualify, which is we're going to ask some deeper, harder questions, and I'll show you that. And we're going to gather more information. We're going to build interest to a higher level, enough to move to the next stage, and we're going to close the prospect on moving to the presentation stage, which is stage 3. Now, so presentation means I'm going to present to you whatever, right? I'm going to present to you the product I sell. This could be basically a formal presentation. It could be a demonstration. But I do want to point out, you may think to yourself, when you hear that, you might say, well, we don't really have anything to present. It's a pretty simple product. The presentation could just be the delivery of the quote, delivery of the proposal. It could be as simple as, let's say you sell something as simple as termite treatment, and so you're on site, you inspect a property, and then you're gonna go through an estimate of how much it would cost to treat the property. That exercise of going through the quote and the estimate is your presentation. A lot of prospects will go through stages like this, and then before they get to the presentation stage, they'll send out a quote. Well, you can turn that quote or that proposal into an actual meeting and say, let's get together. I want to go through I want to go through the proposal and explain it to you. So you can turn it into a meeting, or just the fact that you emailed it is that actual step. But that's the third step. Now, so you may look at that and go, well, my world's a little different, so let me show you some other options here. Now, one thing that you could run into, and you could either do this on purpose or on accident, is what we call the instant appointment, which is where you basically, instead of talking to someone on the phone or at an event or whatever for 2 to 5 minutes, you end up talking for 20 minutes. And the accidental instant appointment is what I kind of explained in the earlier part of the meeting, this webinar, where I said you end up cold calling someone and they ask a few questions, and next thing you know, you've talked to them for 20 minutes. That's sort of the accidental instant appointment. Basically, in my opinion, you've exceeded the cold call and you've actually started to have an appointment right there at the same time. But you should, what I would recommend you do is, if that happens to you regularly and you like that, then you should still know that you're going from one stage to the other, and you still have these different things to accomplish, and you should still know where you are. Now, that you could do an instant appointment on purpose, which is you sell something very simple, and that appointment's going to be a very short meeting, and you just want to get it all done while you're on the phone with the prospect at the same time, and you do it on purpose. If that's the case, no problems here. Whatever works best for you. Now, I will tell you, for a lot of business-to-business sales, I personally believe that it makes good sense to split the initial contact from the appointment, because you're going to get more time with the prospect if you, instead of having a 20-minute cold call and appointment over the phone where the prospect wasn't really prepared for your meeting, I personally think you'll get more time and attention, and they'll be more prepared, you'll be more prepared, if instead you have a 5-minute cold call and then a 20 to 30-minute appointment on the calendar on another day. Now, you might not want to do that if they're a very difficult person to get a hold of, if you think they're going to flake. But if you have confidence in who you are and in your process, I think that works best. Now, you can fall into a trap where you're on a cold call and a prospect asks good questions, and the next thing you know, you get so excited that someone's asking you questions that you answer their questions, and you just sort of miss the opportunity. Well, what I will say is you missed an opportunity, a great opportunity, which is, if they're asking good questions, that's a great opportunity for you to go for the appointment. And you can say something like this: hey, you know what, you're asking really good questions, and I want to dig into that in more detail, and here I am, I've called you out of the blue, and to answer your question, it's going to take a little bit of explanation. So let me just check with you. Do you have another 20 minutes to go through all of this now? Or what do you think about putting some time on the calendar to where I'll send you a GoToMeeting link and we can meet and I can show you some slides, or I can come out to your office, and so then you schedule the meeting. So you do that before answering their questions. One thing you're doing there is you're saving the answers to the questions as like a carrot for them to agree to a meeting. And again, I think there's a lot of benefits to that. But if you go ahead and you answer their questions and then you try to schedule the appointment, I think your leverage and the opportunity there is a bit missed. So just keep that in mind. I want to show you some other alternative ways to kind of piece these boxes together. You could do what we call the instant presentation, which is you basically present at the same time as your appointment. And this could happen either on purpose or on accident. On accident is you go out to meet with the prospect, and let's say you have your laptop with you, and they want to see a demo right there, and you whip out your laptop and you're showing them a demo, and so it turned into basically an instant presentation. You may do this on purpose where you go out on site or whatever for the appointment, and it's not necessarily an accident. It's that you're going to ask them some questions, and based on how it goes, you're going to then progress into your presentation. So that might fit well with the product you sell. Me personally, I have had a salesperson come out to present to me where they did this, but they skipped the appointment. So there was the initial contact to set the appointment with me. They came out to my office and they just handed me a binder and flew right into their presentation. I don't think that worked well at all because they didn't know anything about me, and it was really bad flow. So try to avoid that. But starting out with the appointment where you're learning about them and then transitioning to your presentation after that, if you do it right, it's not bad. Now, you may be in a business where you sell a one-call close, and if you are, then you might have been thinking this whole time, this doesn't really work for me because I have a one-call close. Actually, probably if you have a one-call close product, you probably might not have wanted to attend this session because you don't think you have a sales process. But as I said, even if your sales process is 10 minutes, you still have stages, and this is what it looks like. You still have 2 to 5 minutes, and then after that, on that call, you have your presentation. And I personally still think you should close for that presentation. There should still be some sort of, I want to show you something. It'll take 5 minutes, and I can send you a link, or we could do it right now, and before you do your presentation, even if it's just a 5-minute presentation, you're still closing for that. So this is the one call close structure, and you'll notice the appointment still could happen afterwards. So it's sort of like an alternate. Like if you have a one call close, but you can't close the prospect on the one call, then maybe you fall back to say, okay, well, I kind of went through everything really quickly there. You have some reservations. Why don't we schedule some time to go through that in more detail? So that's sort of why there's an appointment after the presentation. Here's sort of a webinar / event path, and believe it or not, this is what you're on right now with this session here today. There was an initial contact that went out to you, and that was an email invitation to attend an event. That was the initial contact. We didn't speak or anything, but I communicated my message to you through an email. You agreed to register. Now here you are at that second stage, which is presentation. So I'm presenting to you a webinar. The next step in this process might be an appointment. The close for the appointment, if you have a public webinar with a lot of people, you can't really close for the appointment at that second step. So there might be a mini step between boxes 2 and 3 where you're calling someone or emailing them. You might somehow have a way for them to sign up for an appointment, but then so you're just sort of rearranging the order here, but it makes sense to where then you could end up in an appointment with someone that attended your webinar, and you can ask them, hey, what did you think of the event? Did you get anything out of it? I wanted to know what motivated you to spend your time with us. What are you looking to improve? And so you can basically go through your appointment in that format. So I want to go back to the subject of qualifying, because I told you in the first 2 stages you're going to qualify in like the initial contact, and I want to show you what that looks like. So a lot of salespeople don't probably ask enough questions. We personally here at SalesScripter, we believe the best salesperson asks the best questions. So if you want to get better and if you want to be the best salesperson, then one way to do that is to look and see if you're asking good questions or the right questions. So I think a lot of salespeople in that initial contact, they end up sort of just talking a lot about their product, which is a common approach for salespeople, and they don't ask enough questions or any questions. So what we want you to do is we want you to ask pre-qualifying questions, and we call them pre-qualifying questions because they are initial light qualifying questions to determine if it makes sense to go to the next stage of the sales process. Now you'll also notice when I talked about when we focus on the ultimate goal of trying to close the sale, we try to sell to everybody. But you shouldn't try to sell to everybody. You shouldn't try to schedule an appointment with every prospect that will agree to meet with you. You should schedule appointments with prospects that are worth you spending your valuable time. And so the best way to determine if someone's worth your time is to ask some pre-qualifying questions in your initial contact. So here's actually a script that's produced by SalesScripter, and this is actually one of my sales pitches that are loaded up into my SalesScripter account, where that's designed for talking to salespeople. See, when I talk to salespeople and I talk to sales managers, those are two totally different sales pitches. So I actually have different pre-qualifying questions for salespeople compared to pre-qualifying questions for sales managers. But anyways, so here are my questions. Now I just do want to point out, in the initial contact, I have 8 questions here. I'm not going to ask my prospect 8 questions in the initial contact. I only have 2 to 5 minutes to work with. I'm going to ask them 1 or 2 or 3 of these, or maybe just one if I get a great answer to that one question, and then I'm going to move on and try to close. So here are my pre-qualifying questions. Again, that's produced by SalesScripter. So if you asking those questions improves your control over the sales process, because that's really what we're here to talk about. And it does that. They do that for a couple reasons. One is they're going to help you to find a reason for the prospect to go to the next stage. Not only do they find a reason for you to determine if you should spend time with them, that same reason is a justification for the prospect to spend their time with you. So it gives you ammunition to control the sales process right there. And it gives you clarity to which prospects you want to move to the next stage of the sales process. You know, if you attended this webinar because you have these deals at Flake, you might think, well, I need a better sales process. Part of the problem might be that you're getting the wrong deals into your sales process. It's sort of like someone who has relationship problems and they think that I need to find a way to be better at relationships because they have all these issues with the people that they date. When the reality is that they're just dating really bad quality people. And it's not them, it's that they're not dating good people. So they could not change anything about themselves other than the people that they choose to surround themselves with, and right away they're going to be better at relationships. So you want to be better at the sales process. Well, let's get better about the prospects that we let into our sales process, and one of the ways to do that is by pre-qualifying them. You know, you might ask a few of your pre-qualifying questions and realize this person doesn't fit, so you get them out of the way, and then you move on. All right, so how do you figure out your pre-qualifying questions? You can go through these key steps, figure out, and they're listed here, and SalesScripter will take you through a process of building the optimum list of pre-qualifying questions for the products you sell and the different buyers that you sell to. Moving on to step 3, you'll notice that the pre-qualify continues, and when you get to your appointment, the reason why is because remember I showed you I had 8 pre-qualifying questions, and again, here's a first appointment script that's produced by SalesScripter, or just a shameless plug here. So here's just a list of some of the questions I should be asking when I go on an appointment. Now, you'll notice I'm only going to ask 1 or 2 or 3 of those questions before I get to the appointment. So I have a bunch of pre-qualifying questions left over, and that gives me a great thing to talk about in the appointment. Again, improving my ability to control and improve my sales process. So one thing that we want to get to in that appointment is we want to begin to hard qualify the prospect. So this is where we can ask questions that determine whether they have more of a need or a want, if they have money to spend, if they're the true decision maker. What type of competitors are we competing with? Are we in the front? Are we, coming in at the 11th hour? So the appointment is the place to ask these questions. This is a great list of questions. These questions are in SalesScripter. Now, I bet most salespeople don't consistently ask these questions. If you want to improve your control over sales processes, ask these questions, because again, these will eliminate you chasing leads that aren't real. These will help you for the leads that are real, these will help you to identify why they're real and to know why they're real and to put that information in front of the prospect's mind so that you can control that process better.